Chapter 4. Alexey Alexandrovitch, after meeting Vronsky on his own steps, drove, as he had intended, to the Italian opera. He sat through 2 acts there, and saw every one he had wanted to see. On returning home, he carefully scrutinized the hat stand, and noticing that there was not a military overcoat there, he went, as usual, to his own room. But, contrary to his usual habit, he did not go to bed. He walked up and down his study till 3 o'clock in the morning. The feeling of furious anger with his wife, who would not observe the proprieties and keep to the one stipulation he had laid on her, not to receive her lover in his own home, gave him no peace. She had not complied with his request, and he was bound to punish her and carry out his threat, obtain a divorce, and take away his son. He knew all the difficulties connected with this course, but he said he would do it, and now he must carry out his threat. Countess Lydia had hinted that this was the best way out of his position, and of late the obtaining of divorce had been brought to such perfection that Alexey Alexandrovitch saw a possibility of overcoming the formal difficulties. Misfortunes never come singly. In the affairs of the reorganization of the native tribes and of the irrigation of the lands of the Zaraisky province had brought such official worries upon Alexey Alexandrovitch that he had been of late in a continual condition of extreme irritability. He did not sleep the whole night, and his fury, growing in a sort of vast exponential progression, reached its highest limits in the morning. He dressed in haste, and as though carrying his cup full of wrath, and fearing to spill any over, fearing to lose with his wrath the energy necessary for the interview with his wife, he went into her room directly he heard she was up. Anna, who had thought she knew her husband so well, was amazed at his appearance when he went in to her. His brow was set in a glower. His eyes stared darkly before him, avoiding her eyes. His mouth was tightly and contemptuously shut. In his walk, in his gestures, in the sound of his voice, there was a determination and firmness such as his wife had never seen in him. He went into her room, and without greeting her, walked straight up to her writing table, and taking her keys, opened a drawer. "What do you want?" she cried. "Your lover's letters," he said. "They're not here," she said, shutting the drawer. But from that action he saw he had guessed right, and roughly pushing away her hand, he quickly snatched a portfolio in which he knew she used to put her most important papers. She tried to pull the portfolio away, but he pushed her back. "Sit down. I have to speak to you," he said, putting the portfolio under his arm and squeezing it so tightly with his elbow that his shoulder stood up. Amazed and intimidated, she gazed at him in silence. "I told you that I would not allow you to receive your lover in this house." "I had to see him to—" She stopped, not finding a reason. "I do not enter into the details of why a woman wants to see her lover." I only—" She flushed. This coarseness of his angered her and gave her courage. "Surely you must feel how easy it is for you to insult me," she said. "An honest man and an honest woman may be insulted, but to tell a thief he's a thief is simply a statement of fact. This cruelty is something new I did not know in you. You call it cruelty for a husband to give his wife liberty, giving her the honorable protection of his name, simply on the condition of observing the proprieties? Is that cruelty? It's worse than cruel. It's base, if you want to know, Anna said in a rush of hatred, and getting up, she was going away. No, he shrieked in his shrill voice, which pitched a note higher than usual, and his big hands clutched her by the arm so violently that red marks were left from the bracelet he was squeezing. He forcibly sat her down in her place. Base? If you care to use that word, what is base is to forsake husband and child for a lover, while you eat your husband's bread. She bowed her head. She did not say what she had said the evening before to her lover, that he was her husband, and that her husband was superfluous. She did not even think that. She felt all the justice of his words, and only said softly, "You cannot describe my position as worse than I feel it to be myself. But what are you saying all this for?" "What am I saying it for? What for?" he went on angrily. "That you may know that since you have not carried out my wishes in regard to observing outward decorum, I will take measures to put an end to this state of things. Soon, very soon, it will end anyway," she said, and again, at the thought of death near at hand, and now desired, tears came into her eyes. "It will end sooner than you and your lover have planned, if you must have the satisfaction of animal passion. Alexey Alexandrovitch, I won't say it's not generous, but it's not like a gentleman to strike anyone who's down." "Oh yes, you think only of yourself, but the sufferings of a man who was your husband have no interest for you. You don't care that his whole life is ruined, that he is Alexey Alexandrovitch was speaking so quickly that he stammered and was utterly unable to articulate the word suffering. In the end, he pronounced it suffering. She wanted to laugh, and was immediately ashamed that anything could amuse her at such a moment, and for the first time, for an instant, she felt for him, put herself in his place, and was sorry for him. But what could she say or do? Her head sank, and she sat silent. He too was silent for some time, and then began speaking in a frigid, less shrill voice, emphasizing random words that had no special significance. "I came to tell you," he said. She glanced at him. "No, it was my fancy," she thought, recalling the expression of his face when he stumbled over the word suffering. "No, can a man with those dull eyes, with that self-satisfied complacency, feel anything?" "I cannot change anything," she whispered. "I have come to tell you that I am going tomorrow to Moscow, and shall not return again to this house, and you will receive notice of what I decide through the lawyer into whose hands I shall entrust the task of getting a divorce. My son is going to my sister's," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, with an effort recalling what he had meant to say about his son. "You take Seryoza to hurt me," she said, looking at him from under her brows. "You do not love him. Leave me, Seryoza." "Yes, I have lost even my affection for my son, because he is associated with the repulsion I feel for you. But still, I shall take him. Goodbye." And he was going away, but now she detained him. "Alexey Alexandrovitch, leave me, Seryoza," she whispered once more. "I have nothing else to say. Leave Seryoza I shall soon be confined. Leave him." Alexey Alexandrovitch flew into a rage, and snatching his hand from her, he went out of the room without a word. Chapter 5. The waiting room of the celebrated Petersburg lawyer was full when Alexey Alexandrovitch entered it. 3 ladies, an old lady, a young lady, and a merchant's wife, and 3 gentlemen, one a German banker with a ring on his finger, the second a merchant with a beard, and the third a wrathful-looking government clerk in official uniform with a cross on his neck, had obviously been waiting a long while already. 2 clerks were writing at tables with scratching pens. The appurtenances of the writing tables, about which Alexey Alexandrovitch was himself very fastidious, were exceptionally good. He could not help observing this. One of the clerks, without getting up, turned wrathfully to Alexey Alexandrovitch, half closing his eyes. "What are you wanting?" He replied that he had to see the lawyer on some business. "He is engaged," the clerk responded severely, and he pointed with his pen at the persons waiting and went on writing. "Can't he spare time to see me?" said Alexey Alexandrovitch. "He has no time free. He is always busy. Kindly wait your turn." "Then I must trouble you to give him my card," Alexey Alexandrovitch said with dignity, seeing the impossibility of preserving his incognito. The clerk took the card and, obviously not approving of what he read on it, went to the door. Alexey Alexandrovitch was in principle in favor of the publicity of legal proceedings, though for some higher official considerations he disliked the application of the principle in Russia, and disapproved of it as far as he could disapprove of anything instituted by authority of the emperor. His whole life had been spent in administrative work, and consequently, when he did not approve of anything, his disapproval was softened by the recognition of the inevitability of mistakes and the possibility of reform in every department. In the new public law courts, he disliked the restrictions laid on the lawyers conducting cases, but till then he had had nothing to do with law courts, and so had disapproved of their publicity simply in theory. Now his disapproval was strengthened by the unpleasant impression made on him in the lawyer's waiting room. "Coming immediately," said the clerk, and 2 minutes later there did actually appear in the doorway the large figure of an old solicitor who had been consulting with the lawyer himself. The lawyer was a little, squat, bald man with a dark reddish beard, light-colored, long eyebrows, and an overhanging brow. He was attired as though for a wedding, from his cravat to his double watch chain and varnished boots. His face was clever and manly, but his dress was dandified and in bad taste. "Pray come in," said the lawyer, addressing Alexey Alexandrovitch, and gloomily ushering Karenina in before him. He closed the door. "Won't you sit down?" He indicated an armchair at a writing table covered with papers. He sat down himself, and, rubbing his little hands with short fingers covered with white hairs, he bent his head on one side. But as soon as he was settled in this position, a moth flew over the table. The lawyer, with a swiftness that could never have been expected of him, opened his hands, caught the moth, and returned to his former attitude. "Before beginning to speak of my business," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, following the lawyer's movements with wondering eyes. "I ought to observe that the business about which I have to speak to you is to be strictly private." The lawyer's overhanging reddish mustaches were parted in a scarcely perceptible smile. "I should not be a lawyer if I could not keep secrets confided to me. But if you would like proof—" Alexey Alexandrovitch glanced at his face and saw that the shrewd gray eyes were laughing and seemed to know all about it already. "You know my name?" Alexey Alexandrovitch resumed. "I know you in the good," again he got a moth, "work you are doing, like every Russian," said the lawyer, bowing. Alexey Alexandrovitch sighed, plucking up his courage. But having once made up his mind, he went on in his shrill voice, without timidity or hesitation, accentuating here and there a word. "I have the misfortune," Alexey Alexandrovitch began, "to have been deceived in my married life, and I desire to break off all relations with my wife by legal means, that is to say, to be divorced, but to do this so that my son may not remain with his mother." The lawyer's gray eyes tried not to laugh, but they were dancing with irrepressible glee, and Alexey Alexandrovitch saw that it was not simply the delight of a man who has just got a profitable job. There was triumph and joy. There was a gleam like the malignant gleam he saw in his wife's eyes. "You desire my assistance in securing a divorce?" "Yes, precisely so. But I ought to warn you that I may be wasting your time and attention. I have come simply to consult you as a preliminary step. I want a divorce, but the form in which it is possible is of great consequence to me. It is very possible that if that form does not correspond with my requirements, I may give up a legal divorce." "Oh, that's always the case," said the lawyer, "and that's always for you to decide." He let his eyes rest on Alexey Alexandrovitch's feet, feeling that he might offend his client by the sight of his irrepressible amusement. He looked at a moth that flew before his nose and moved his hands, but did not catch it from regard for Alexey Alexandrovitch's position. "Though in their general features our laws on this subject are known to me," pursued Alexey Alexandrovitch, "I should be glad to have an idea of the forms in which such things are done in practice." "You would be glad," the lawyer, without lifting his eyes, responded, adopting with a certain satisfaction the tone of his client's remarks, "for me to lay before you all the methods by which you could secure what you desire?" And on receiving an assuring nod from Alexey Alexandrovitch, he went on, stealing a glance now and then at Alexey Alexandrovitch's face, which was growing red in patches. "Divorce by our laws," he said, with a slight shade of disapproval of our laws, "is possible, as you are aware, in the following cases." "Wait a little," he called to a clerk who put his head in at the door, but he got up all the same, said a few words to him, and sat down again. "In the following cases: physical defect in the married parties, desertion without communication for 5 years," he said, crooking a short finger covered with hair, adultery, this word he pronounced with obvious satisfaction, subdivided as follows. He continued to crook his fat fingers, though the three cases and their subdivisions could obviously not be classified together. Physical defect of the husband or of the wife, adultery of the husband or of the wife, and as by now all his fingers were used up, he uncrooked all his fingers and went on. This is the theoretical view, but I imagine you have done me the honor to apply to me in order to learn its application in practice, and therefore, guided by precedents, I must inform you that in practice, cases of divorce may all be reduced to the following. There's no physical defect, I may assume, nor desertion. Alexey Alexandrovich bowed his head in assent. May be reduced to the following: adultery of one of the married parties, and the detection in the fact of the guilty party by mutual agreement, and failing such agreement, accidental detection. It must be admitted that the latter case is rarely met with in practice, said the lawyer, and stealing a glance at Alexey Alexandrovich, he paused, as a man selling pistols, after enlarging on the advantages of each weapon, might await his customer's choice. But Alexey Alexandrovich said nothing, and therefore the lawyer went on. The most usual and simple, the sensible course, I consider, is adultery by mutual consent. I should not permit myself to express it so, speaking with a man of no education, he said, but I imagine that to you this is comprehensible. Alexey Alexandrovich was, however, so perturbed that he did not immediately comprehend all the good sense of adultery by mutual consent, and his eyes expressed this uncertainty, but the lawyer promptly came to his assistance. People cannot go on living together. Here you have a fact, and if both are agreed about it, the details and formalities become a matter of no importance, and at the same time, this is the simplest and most certain method. Alexey Alexandrovich fully understood now, but he had religious scruples which hindered the execution of such a plan. That is out of the question in the present case, he said. Only one alternative is possible: undesigned detection, supported by letters which I have. At the mention of letters, the lawyer pursed his lips and gave utterance to a thin little compassionate and contemptuous sound. Kindly consider, he began. Cases of that kind are, as you are aware, under ecclesiastical jurisdiction. The Reverend Fathers are fond of going into the minutest details in cases of that kind, he said with a smile, which betrayed his sympathy with the Reverend Father's taste. Letters may, of course, be a partial confirmation, but detection in the fact there must be of the most direct kind, that is, by eyewitnesses. In fact, if you do me the honor to entrust your confidence to me, you will do well to leave me the choice of measures to be employed. If one wants the result, one must admit the means. If it is so, Alexey Alexandrovich began, suddenly turning white, but at that moment the lawyer rose and again went to the door to speak to the intruding clerk. Tell her we don't haggle over fees, he said, and returned to Alexey Alexandrovitch. On his way back, he caught unobserved another moth. "Nice state my rep curtains will be in by the summer," he thought, frowning. "And you were saying," he said. "I will communicate my decision to you by letter," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, getting up, and he clutched at the table. After standing a moment in silence, he said, "From your words, I may consequently conclude that a divorce may be obtained. I would ask you to let me know what are your terms." "It may be obtained if you give me complete liberty of action," said the lawyer, not answering his question. "When can I reckon on receiving information from you?" he asked, moving towards the door, his eyes in varnished boots shining. "In a week's time. Your answer as to whether you will undertake to conduct the case and on what terms you will be so good as to communicate to me." "Very good." The lawyer bowed respectfully, let his client out of the door, and, left alone, gave himself up to his sense of amusement. He felt so mirthful that, contrary to his rules, he made a reduction in his terms to the haggling lady, and gave up catching moths, finally deciding that next winter he must have the furniture covered with velvet. Chapter 6. Alexey Alexandrovitch had gained a brilliant victory at the sitting of the Commission of the 17th of August, but in the sequel this victory cut the ground out from under his feet. The new commission for the inquiry into the condition of the native tribes in all its branches had been formed and dispatched to its destination with an unusual speed and energy inspired by Alexey Alexandrovitch. Within 3 months a report was presented. The condition of the native tribes was investigated in its political, administrative, economic, ethnic, material, and religious aspects. To all these questions there were answers, admirably stated, and answers admitting no shade of doubt, since they were not a product of human thought, always liable to error, but were all the product of official activity. The answers were all based on official data furnished by governors and heads of churches, and founded on the reports of district magistrates and ecclesiastical superintendents, founded in their turn on the reports of parochial overseers and parish priests. And so all these answers were unhesitating and certain. All such questions as, for instance, of the cause of the failure of crops, of the adherence of certain tribes to their ancient beliefs, etc., questions which, but for the convenient intervention of the official machine, are not and cannot be solved for ages, received full unhesitating solution, and this solution was in favor of Alexey Alexandrovitch's contention. But Stremov, who had felt stung to the quick at the last sitting, had, on reception of the commissioner's report, resorted to tactics which Alexey Alexandrovitch had not anticipated. Stremov, carrying with him several members, went over to Alexey Alexandrovitch's side, and not contenting himself with warmly defending the measures proposed by Karenina, proposed other, more extreme measures in the same direction. These measures, still further exaggerated in opposition to what was Alexey Alexandrovitch's fundamental idea, were passed by the commission, and then the aim of Stremov's tactics became apparent. Carried to the extreme, The measure seemed at once so absurd that the highest authorities and public opinion and intellectual ladies and newspapers all at the same time fell foul of them, expressing their indignation both with the measures and their nominal father, Alexey Alexandrovitch. Stremov drew back, affecting to have blindly followed Karenina, and to have been astounded and distressed at what had been done. This meant the defeat of Alexey Alexandrovitch. But in spite of failing health, in spite of domestic grief, he did not give in. There was a split in the commission. Some members, with Stremov at their head, justified their mistake on the ground that they had put faith in the commission of revision instituted by Alexey Alexandrovitch, and maintained that the report of the commission was rubbish and simply so much waste paper. Alexey Alexandrovitch, with a following of those who saw the danger of so revolutionary an attitude to official documents, persisted in upholding the statements obtained by the revising commission. In consequence of this, in the higher spheres, and even in society, all was chaos, and although everyone was interested, no one could tell whether the native tribes really were becoming impoverished and ruined, or whether they were in a flourishing condition. The position of Alexey Alexandrovitch, owing to this, and partly owing to the contempt lavished on him for his wife's infidelity, became very precarious, and in this position he took an important resolution. To the astonishment of the commission, he announced that he should ask permission to go himself to investigate the question on the spot. And having obtained permission, Alexey Alexandrovitch prepared to set off to these remote provinces. Alexey Alexandrovitch's departure made a great sensation, the more so as just before he started, he officially returned the posting fares allowed him for 12 horses to drive to the destination. "I think it very noble," Betsy said about this to the Princess Myakaya. "Why take money for posting horses when everyone knows there are railways now?" But Princess Myakaya did not agree, and the Princess Tverskaya's opinion annoyed her indeed. "It's all very well for you to talk," said she, "when you have I don't know how many millions, but I am very glad when my husband goes on a revising tour in the summer. It's very good for him and pleasant traveling about, and it's a settled arrangement for me to keep a carriage and coachman on the money." On his way to the remote provinces, Alexey Alexandrovitch stopped for 3 days at Moscow. The day after his arrival, he was driving back from calling on the Governor-General. At the crossroads by Gazetoy Palace, where there were always crowds of carriages and sledges, Alexey Alexandrovitch suddenly heard his name called out in such a loud and cheerful voice that he could not help looking around. At the corner of the pavement, in a short, stylish overcoat and low-crowned, fashionable hat, jauntily askew, with a smile that showed a gleam of white teeth and red lips, stood Stepan Arkadyevitch, radiant, young, and beaming. He called him vigorously and urgently, and insisted on his stopping. He had one arm on the window of a carriage that was stopping at the corner, and out of the window were thrust the heads of a lady in a velvet hat and 2 children. Stepan Arkadyevitch was smiling and beckoning to his brother-in-law. The lady smiled a kindly smile too, and she waved her hand to Alexey Alexandrovitch. It was Dolly with her children. Alexey Alexandrovitch did not want to see anyone in Moscow, and least of all his wife's brother. He raised his hat and would have driven on, but Stepan Arkadyevitch told his coachman to stop and ran across the snow to him. "Well, what a shame not to have let us know. Been here long? I was at Dusov's yesterday and saw Karenina on the visitors' list, but it never entered my head that it was you," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, sticking his head in the window of the carriage, "or I should have looked you up. I am glad to see you," he said, knocking one foot against the other to shake the snow off. "What a shame of you to not let us know," he repeated. "I had no time. I am very busy," Alexey Alexandrovitch responded dryly. "Come to see my wife. She does so want to see you." Alexey Alexandrovitch unfolded the rug in which his frozen feet were wrapped, and getting out of his carriage he made his way over the snow to Darya Alexandrovna. "Why, Alexey Alexandrovitch, what are you cutting us like this for?" said Dolly, smiling. "I was very busy. Delighted to see you," he said in a tone clearly indicating that he was annoyed by it. "How are you?" "Tell me, how is my darling Anna?" Alexey Alexandrovitch mumbled something and would have gone on, but Stepan Arkadyevitch stopped him. "I tell you what we'll do tomorrow. Dolly, ask him to dinner. We'll ask Koznishev and Pashkov, and we'll entertain him with our Moscow celebrities." "Yes, please, do come," said Dolly. "We will expect you at 5 or 6 o'clock if you like. How's my darling Anna?" "She is quite well," Alexey Alexandrovitch mumbled, frowning. "Delighted," and he moved away towards his carriage. "You will come?" Dolly called after him. Alexey Alexandrovitch said something which Dolly could not catch in the noise of the moving carriages. "I shall come round tomorrow," Stepan Arkadyevitch shouted to him. Alexey Alexandrovitch got into his carriage and buried himself in it so as to neither see nor be seen. "He's an odd one," said Stepan Arkadyevitch to his wife, and glancing at his watch, he made a motion of his hand before his face, indicating a caress to his wife and children, and walked jauntily along the pavement. "Stiva, Stiva," Dolly called, reddening. He turned around. "I must get coats, you know, for Grisha and Tanya. Give me the money." "Oh, never mind that. You tell them I'll pay the bill," and he vanished on the street.